Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you are not. I am EDJ, and we are continuing with History Marche's Hannibal series. So last time we saw the Battle of Lake, I can't pronounce its name right now, I forgot, but the point is, where he basically got rid of Consul Longus, the very dangerous and risky journey through the March swamps. Hannibal lost an eye, but at the end he made it, and he gathered more, tactical success over the enemy. So now we're at why didn't Hannibal attack Rome? And this is kind of like a big one, right? A lot of people kind of talk about. So yeah, this is a big one. Like, hey, why didn't Hannibal just take Rome? And that's usually the big one, right? Question regarding him. And from what my understanding is, he just didn't have the resources to actually conduct a proper siege of, wait. Yeah, sorry about that. If you hear talking in the background, I want to apologize. Hopefully it's not too distracting, but either way. So yeah, I believe Hannibal just didn't have the equipment, right? Whether you blame that on Carthage not fully supporting him or whatever, point is, I don't think he had the proper siege equipment, because Rome at this point, I believe, was really, really fortified and, like, not easy to take. So yeah, I don't think Hannibal had the army or the equipment to conduct a proper siege. Also, Rome had allies, and I believe Hannibal's overall strategy was to get rid of Rome's allies, I think, south of the peninsula, so he was also doing that. What else? There's more. Gosh darn it. Sorry, I had to, like, cut. But I also think he intended for Rome to surrender, right? Like, the thing is about this ancient world, I feel like if Hannibal had fought any other group of people, he would have won 10 times over, right? Especially after Cannae. Like, most normal people would have just surrendered, right? But the thing about the Romans is that what makes them unique is that they don't give up. You can't force them to surrender. The only way to stop the Romans is to literally commit genocide. I don't support that, by the way. It's just, that's the only way you're gonna make them stop. You would have to, like, kill them all or destroy their cities and whatnot in order to make them stop. As I mentioned before, he didn't have the equipment, I think, to conduct a proper siege, so Hannibal was trying to isolate them from their allies, I think, and, defeat them enough to where they would want to submit, but at the same time, as we know, they didn't, and they lived to fight another day. And I think this is something Hannibal probably underestimated. Like, it's weird, because I do believe Hannibal understands the Roman psychology, as we've seen already. He can lead them to traps, he understands his enemy, but I feel like the one thing, the most important thing, that he did not understand is that they would never give up. Because I'm not sure if he ever expected them to surrender, but if he did, he was sorely mistaken, because he could wipe out army after army as he did, but at the end, they don't surrender. So you could almost say that was, like, the overall flaw. Hannibal trapped himself in the Italian peninsula, won great victories, but without the proper logistical support, to get equipment there and whatnot. And whether you blame Carthage for not fully getting behind Hannibal or whatever, at the end, Hannibal just couldn't deliver that death blow to the city itself, so at the end, the war would never end, So it's almost like a weird thing to overlook, but that's probably the most important aspect of going to war with Rome that one has to take into account, I think. Either way, Hannibal failed, as we know, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going on this long tangent, but I think those are kind of the main reasons I said earlier as to why he didn't just attack Rome. There's a lot more to it, but, yeah. Alright, so yeah, with that said, let's get to it. I think I covered a lot of it. I want to see what HistoryMarche has to say if I got any of the points fully correct. Also, you guys know, I got new. I don't have to wear the headphones anymore. I got these cool hooked, like, earbuds that don't even go inside the ear. Because I had, like, a really bad ear infection earlier this year. It lasted, like, the first few months of this year. While I was, like, doing the Napoleon series, it was awful. But, yeah, now I'm good, and, yeah. Either way, let's get to it, huh? Let's find out the reasons why Hannibal didn't attack Rome by HistoryMarche.
So far, we have followed Hannibal on his warpath from Iberia, through Gaul, across the Alps, and all the way into central Italy. He defeated the Roman legions time after time, and after just 7 months of campaigning in Italy, he stood only 130 kilometers from the capital. The road to Rome was open, less than 10 days' march away. But Hannibal's next move is a subject of much debate, and in this video we want to discuss the decisions he made after his victory at Lake Trasimene. But first, a big shout out for our friends over the first 7 months of Hannibal Barca's campaign in Italy were nothing short of spectacular. Despite nearly half of his army perishing in the Alps, he led his tired troops and defeated the Romans at Ticinus and Trebia. This won him the support of Gallic tribes in Cisalpine Gaul, many of whom joined the Carthaginian general. The march continued south towards central Italy, through the Apennine Mountains and the Arno River swampland. The 4 days it took to cross the swamps were particularly costly. Many of his men drowned, while others died from exhaustion. Hannibal himself lost sight in one eye due to infection. A great number of pack animals and horses were also lost, which caused a severe problem for his campaign plans. While he managed to patch up his baggage train by confiscating pack animals from Etruscan farmers, horses were far less common and needed to be trained for war. This left Hannibal's cavalry contingent greatly weakened for the upcoming battle against Flaminius. Yet, despite this setback, the elusive Carthaginian general remained hidden from the Romans after emerging from the swamp. Flaminius missed the opportunity to attack Hannibal's weakened army. And just days later, the Roman consul would perish in the defeat at Lake Trasimene. Hannibal re-equipped his light infantry with weapons and armor taken from fallen Roman soldiers, and vast quantities of supplies were captured, such as food, canteens, clothing, boots, blankets, tents, saddles, bridles, and fodder. But, most importantly, 4,000 pack animals and 2,000 cavalry horses were captured from Flaminius' army at Trasimene. And
Flaminius really just gave Hannibal everything. Dang. It's like, Hannibal must have been like, thanks for the attack, bro. I needed resources. Man, it is amazing how his army is usually like on the verge of just being completely decimated, but after a victory or two, he just can replenish it. Like, you know, I think some people have criticized Hannibal's logistics, because obviously, like I said, he kind of put himself in the peninsula where getting, you know, supplies and whatnot was not easy. He had to basically get them during here. He didn't have like a supply line to his home base at Hispania, and I know a lot of people are quick to like blame Carthage, right? Like, Carthage should have devoted much more time and energy, and I do agree. Like, I think they didn't put 100% effort behind Hannibal, but at the same time, I'm like, I wonder how they could have supplied Hannibal. It would be really hard to, because like I said, they would have to get their ships to Italy, right, or whatnot. But assuming that the Romans, you know, well, they do have naval superiority, so again, that's not the easiest thing to do. So I don't know. Like I said, I think some people have kind of said like maybe that wasn't the smartest thing in the long run, but you have to give it to him. The dude like lasted for like 15 years in Italy without that. Like I think that just kind of shows you just how resourceful the man was, but also put him in a situation where he needed to constantly, you know, win battles, also to keep the fickle people in his army, like the Gauls and whatnot, on his side. He needed to keep it, and that's why the Fabian strategy was so effective, because it kind of robbed Hannibal of those victories he needed. But unfortunately, the Romans couldn't see the brilliance of it at the time, you know? So, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, that sucked.
The 4,000 horses in Hannibal's ambush of Servilius's cavalry contingent. Hannibal was now able to replace the horses he lost in the swamps, bringing his own cavalry contingent back to full strength.
Join large-scale battles with military vehicles. The online action game War Thunder has received a major...
After 7 months of campaigning in Italy, Hannibal dominated the Romans in the field. Between the battles of Ticinus, Trebia, Trasimene, and the ambush of Servilius's cavalry, Hannibal eliminated over 50,000 Roman soldiers, a number equal to 10 legions.
Oh my goodness, and he did that by himself. I think the first Punic War, I think the Romans lost like over 100,000. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think I heard that Hannibal, when he was done, had brought the death toll nearly to that level by himself, or close to it. And the thing is, a large part of those deaths were just like the storms that ravaged the Roman navy, right? So, you know, the fact that Hannibal, if true, could rival natural disasters to the Romans by himself with his ragtag army that doesn't have much support from Carthage or his home base, it just goes to show you the insanity and just the prowess of this man and how dangerous he really was. You know, just insane, man.
Now that Fabius Maximus was elected dictator, Hannibal was encamped just 130 kilometers from the city of Rome. No army stood in his way, and he could have marched on the capital in less than 10 days. Yet, he decided not to. Let's try to examine why. In warfare, tactical objectives and strategic objectives need to be connected in some form. Tactics refers to methods that an army employs in order to win battles. Strategy deals with broad objectives that a warring country has, as well as the means necessary to achieve these objectives. Without strategy, battles are disconnected individual events. Without tactics, any strategy falls apart. In the Second Punic War, Rome's strategic objectives were to keep the territories it won in the First Punic War, and perhaps seize parts of Iberia. Carthage, on the other hand, sought to retain dominance over Iberia and its valuable silver mines, and win back Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica that were lost in the First War, along with other minor islands in the Mediterranean. This would enable Carthage to regain its dominance on the sea. Rome correctly understood Carthage's objectives and moved to prevent them. Of the 11 legions that were in the field at the time of Hannibal's arrival in Italy, 2 were stationed in Sicily, 2 in Sardinia, and 2 were sent to Iberia, while 1 remained in Tarentum. 4 legions were left in Italy to deal with Hannibal. At the time of the battle at Lake Trasimene, 2 legions were commanded by Flaminius, which were destroyed. The other 2 were commanded by Servilius, which were rendered useless after the destruction of their cavalry, forcing Servilius to return north to fight an ongoing battle with the marauding Gauls. With the appointment of Fabius Maximus, Rome did authorize the formation of 2 new legions for the defense of the city, an annual practice that became regular as of 217 BC. But these legions likely were not fully trained, and perhaps weren't at full strength either. Hannibal had a clear advantage in the field. Furthermore, he could rely on the 70 Carthaginian ships that roamed the waters of the Etruscan coast, only 120 kilometers from Hannibal's position. Why did Carthage send these ships so far into Roman waters? 70 ships was over 60% of their entire fleet. Since they were not carrying reinforcements nor supplies for the army in Italy, their presence near Rome itself, at the same time when Hannibal was also so close to the capital, suggests that a possible land-sea operation was planned to take the city. The 70 Carthaginian warships would prevent Roman transport ships from ferrying troops from Sardinia to the capital, while Hannibal attacks the city. The fact that supports this is the positioning of the Roman fleet. Of the 220 ships in the fleet, 10 were at Ariminum on the Adriatic coast, 150 were protecting the waters of Sicily, and another 30 were stationed in Iberia to support the Scipio brothers. Therefore, only around 30 warships were protecting the capital. With 70 ships, Carthage had a clear naval advantage for any immediate operations against the city, and on land, Hannibal was virtually at the gates, unopposed. To move on the capital after Trasimene would have made tactical and strategic sense. An attack, a siege, or even a feint would have forced the Romans to withdraw troops from other theatres to protect the city. This would have exposed Sicily, Sardinia, or Iberia to Carthaginian attacks. At the same time, Hannibal could lift the siege to deal with any approaching armies. This failure to create a link between the strategic and tactical objectives perhaps played a decisive role in the outcome of the war. Hannibal himself later acknowledged that this was a missed opportunity, but he never explained his decisions. Two main reasons for not attacking the Roman capital were suggested by historians. First, that Hannibal did not have enough troops to besiege the city due to its size and its garrison. This doesn't sufficiently explain why Hannibal decided not to attack. Namely, during the times of the Republic, the population of the city of Rome was between 450,000 and 500,000 people. The entire population lived in an area of just 13.5 square kilometers. The city was surrounded by the 11-kilometer-long Servian Wall, a stone barrier that's 10 meters high in some places. There were 5 main gates on major roads leading into the city. 10-meter-deep defensive trenches were dug up in front of the walls, where the city faced open fields. These defenses should not have posed a formidable obstacle to Carthaginian engineering abilities, nor was the city too big to be besieged by Hannibal's army of around 50,000 troops. In addition, even if the city's garrison of 2 legions were battle-ready, 10,000 troops manning the walls and multiple gates would not have posed a strong enough threat to deter an attack. The second suggestion is that a naval blockade was not possible because the Roman fleet would keep the supply lines open along the river Tiber. This would have been true had Ostia been big enough to be Rome's main port at the time, but it didn't become a major port for another 250 years until Emperor Claudius expanded it. At the time of the Second Punic War, the majority of seaborne supplies for the capital came through the port of Puteoli, over 190 kilometers down the coast, and were then transported to the city overland. Hannibal could have cut off these supplies by blocking the roads. At least for some time, a naval blockade of Rome would not be needed, and the Carthaginian ships could focus on preventing transports from bringing in reinforcements from Sardinia. So, why did Hannibal, one of history's greatest risk-takers, choose not to attempt to take the city, while he was, arguably, at his strongest, and Rome was at its weakest? One possibility that is often suggested by historians is that Hannibal's view of war was influenced by Hellenistic thinking. He was certainly an admirer of Pyrrhus of Epirus. Namely, Hannibal's view was that maybe the total destruction of the enemy was not needed to win the war. Instead, battles would be fought until the leadership of one side conceded defeat.
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned that. So the first point I mentioned is, yeah, Hannibal didn't have the manpower or, you know, the siege equipment to take Rome, and HistoryMarche has proposed that they could have, or at least posed a much more threat, at least at this time. So then goes the other point I talked about, that Hannibal probably expected the Romans to give up, which is amazing that someone who understood Rome so much would fail to understand the most important aspect of them, I would argue, is that they don't surrender. You know, and we covered the Pyrrhus of Epirus series by Kings and Generals on here. And, you know, Pyrrhus won battles against Rome. You know, the first 2 engagements, he defeated them. And then he sent peace terms. Like, alright, you know, we've defeated you. Here are the terms. And they just said no. Like, we're not gonna accept them. Which, you know, I think must have shocked Pyrrhus. Because it's like, I just destroyed 2 of your armies. And they're like, well, we'll just field a new one. You know? And it's like, I think that's the thing about this point in history. I think anyone who loses as much manpower as Rome has would automatically sue for peace. If Hannibal had fought anyone else in the world, he would have won already. The thing, you know, the enemy would have probably already sued for peace. It's just, the Romans won't. Like, the only way you could stop them is complete destruction. And I think Hannibal ever expecting them to surrender, you know, was something he failed to understand from his enemy. And if it's true, you know, he should have gone into this war with complete destruction in mind. I think that's probably the biggest failing, right? He didn't if true, again, you know, then yeah, that's probably his biggest failure right there. That's the most important aspect of the enemy he ignored. You know, if true, obviously. But if he actually thought like that. But yeah, I think the Hellenistic way of viewing things, as we know, the Romans kind of ended the Hellenistic period, and we saw that, you know, the successors of Alexander the Great fell to Rome. So yeah, that's the thing. The Hellenistic view needed to be replaced with the Roman view, and Hannibal, if he was operating under that Hellenistic viewpoint, then yeah, I could see why the ultimate failure was there, because the strategy should have been destroy Rome at any cost. And yeah.
They realized that they could no longer win on the field of battle, and stood to lose more if they continued fighting. Therefore, he may have assumed that Rome would seek terms once the many contests of armies had been decided.
No.
If Hannibal did indeed hold this conventional Hellenistic viewpoint, he may have thought that an attack on Rome would have been more costly than fighting battles in the open.
Again, that's if, right? I don't want... That's the thing. If Hannibal had that viewpoint, you know, Oversimplified seemed to be of the opinion that he had that viewpoint. But yeah, if that's so, then that's the biggest strategic failure Hannibal had, and that's why it all ultimately failed, you know? So yeah, as we know, Rome does not surrender. You have to destroy them in order to win. Anyone else would have made terms, just the Romans don't, and that's the biggest thing someone has to keep in mind when they go to war with Rome, is that they're not gonna say no, you know, they're not gonna accept any terms of peace. So yeah.
But the Roman view of war was straightforward. Destroy or be destroyed. Rome would not accept any form of defeat, no matter the cost. They would rather fight to the last man and have an enemy assert their dominance by imposing conditions on its citizens. Perhaps Hannibal still didn't fully understand this in 217 BC. Whatever the case, Fabius began defensive preparations in Rome, while, unbeknownst to him, Hannibal turned east, towards the Adriatic coast. A game of cat and mouse between the two commanders is about to begin. In this video, we provided plausible reasons, based on our research, as to why Hannibal didn't attack Rome after Lake Trasimene. We'd certainly like to know what your thoughts are, so if you have any theories of your own, let us know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching. Credit goes to our awesome patrons for
Okay. After Transamine, a plan of some kind involving the Roman capital certainly existed. The only question is, what was the plan and why wasn't it carried out? Up to half of eligible Roman men were under arms in 217 BC. Some 240,000, 120,000 would go on to die in combat, from disease, in shipwrecks, and from other accidents. Before the Scipio brothers invaded Spain, Carthaginian manpower pool and resources were greater than that of the Roman Republic, yet the Romans matched their enemy on the strategic level. So yeah, overall, I think I kind of got some points correct, at least in the opening of, you know, the whole manpower argument that some historians would argue. And just the thing is Hannibal expecting the enemy to surrender, but obviously we know Rome, they don't surrender no matter how severe their losses are. So yeah, overall very enlightening, very good, you know, interesting to see the missed opportunity that if Hannibal had gone against Rome, who knows what would have happened. But yeah, that was an interesting way to view it, which kind of, you know, changes the perspective of just Hannibal's ultimate aim and how he was approaching this entire war in terms of mindset. Which is funny, because you think someone who hates Rome as much as Hannibal, who swore as a child to be Rome's enemy, would, like, be okay with just with them surrendering. You think he would go all in, like, kill them all, you know, Doomslayer. But again, if he was operating under the mindset of, well, they'll come to terms and we beat them enough, like, which is interesting. I don't know, you'd expect Hannibal of all people to be like, I'm gonna kill every last Roman. And maybe he should have operated with that mindset, because he may have actually, I don't know, done differently. I don't know. At the end, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next video. So I'll end it right here, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.